We deploy about $70 million a year, and we serve just over 6,500 households a year with the Weatherization Assistance Program. And that's really focused on everything from single family to multifamily, doing energy efficiency upgrades that specifically reduce the cost of operating and or specifically for the tenants, reducing their own utility bills, which is a really important component to all of this work. Some of our newer programs, I mentioned our Clean Energy Initiative. This is a partnership between NYSERDA and HCR that really stemmed out of the work and the collaboration from the Climate Action Council. This program is really meant to be an add-on to any of the projects that are coming in for our existing financing sources for our multifamily team that provide sort of that gap to get buildings above what we would call baseline and into our stretch standards. So we're really looking at projects that are starting to achieve some of those stretch goals that we have in our sustainability guidelines. And we provide up to about $35,000 a unit in that funding source.
I'm Lauren Stanforth with New York State Homes and Community Renewal, and this is Renewing New York, a podcast where we focus on HCR's vital work under the leadership of Governor Kathy Hochul on one of the biggest issues facing New Yorkers, creating and preserving safe, stable housing that residents can afford. For this episode, we're focusing on HCR's Sustainability Unit, a team of experts who ensure we are providing safe, affordable housing while lowering energy consumption and costs and reducing carbon emissions. Joining us is Samantha Pierce, Vice President of Sustainability at HCR. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Lauren. Nice to be here.
So the word sustainability, what does that mean to you?
Such an important word in my personal and professional life. I've been a housing and sustainability specialist in the field for over 15 years now. I feel really lucky because I've been at the intersection of housing and finance, affordability, and sustainability in most of my career. I've held positions as an operator of buildings, as an energy engineer, and now I think most especially as an administrator of the work that we do for the state of New York. I feel like sustainability in this space means being able to predictably and consistently operate housing so that we can physically sustain the properties and consistently provide comfortable living conditions for the residents that occupy those spaces. So it feels really important in the sense that we have a housing crisis in New York State with a shortage of quality housing. And so thinking about sustainability being a key factor in maintaining that quality of housing from a building perspective is really when I think about what is housing sustainability and what does sustainability mean in this space.
It's interesting you talked about you've been doing it for 15 years, and does the word sustainability, the way it is used now, exist 15 years ago, or was it a different way we talked about that topic?
Yeah, I think it's sort of evolved over time. Sustainability for me when I was in college and before I was in this space was sort of add-on, that as a studying architect meant you did something extra to the building that was innovative. And I think sustainability has really evolved now into being the sustainability of a property over time, as well as including the innovation that we sort of familiarly recall back to a time when it felt new or more innovative. And now I really personally think it's just at the core of what we should be doing from building properties that are long lasting.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned it used to be something extra when now it's this should be the standard as being part of all construction. New York has been out front in addressing climate change, particularly after the adoption of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act of 2019. An entity called the Climate Action Council in December 2022 then devised a scoping plan that noted that more than 30% of emissions in New York are from buildings and laid out goals for emission reduction. So in that context, what does the sustainability unit do?
So it was a really exciting time. I've now been at the agency for just over 5 years. And when I started, right at the precipice of when the scoping plan work was starting at the state level, the sustainability unit was primarily focused on sustainable underwriting from our financing perspective. And now joining and creating a broader approach to what the sustainability unit does in alignment with the goals and efforts of the CLCPA. We really focus on everything from single family homes to multifamily projects that we're financing at the State Housing Agency. And the sustainability unit is specifically focused on providing technical support for all of those properties and for the teams that exist across the agency. We are responsible for maintaining and reviewing properties against a set of sustainability guidelines that the sustainability unit manages and oversees. And we're also really critically responsible for deploying several programs that help to provide additional funding on top of our baseline financing that we provide in existing programs that enable properties to add on energy efficiency upgrades and decarbonization scopes of work that are really in alignment with the whole mission that I was speaking to before around long-term preservation and sustainability of our properties and the work of the CLCPA in terms of reducing emissions and ensuring our properties and our housing are healthy, safe, and reliable spaces for our residents to occupy.
Yeah, so you just mentioned it briefly that you've been with a sustainability unit for about 5 years. You actually started the unit, correct? So how did the unit first come to be?
Well, there was one existing program that is our weatherization assistance program that's existed since before my tenure here, but it didn't really fit within other similar programs. It was a unique program offering the agency supervised and deploys and continues to deploy to this day. But 5 years ago, when I started, there was a really interesting energy that was happening at the state because of the collaborative nature of what the CLCPA and the Climate Action Council was charged with producing. So it really created this interagency collaborative working group that sparked a lot of innovation and interagency collaboration, specifically around how we deploy funding as a state and not just as specific agencies. And so through that effort of the Climate Action Council and our work of Commissioner Visnaskis partnering with specifically NYSERDA and DPS and really leading that effort, one of the paramount programs that we're now deploying sort of came to be through that collaboration and that effort, which is our Clean Energy Initiative program. And so that really enabled us to set a baseline of the programs that we're now deploying, build out and scale up the unit to what it is now, which is writing, overseeing, and reviewing our technical guidelines, as well as deploying 7 programs. So we went from a team of 1 program to now a team of 42 people that's responsible for deploying 7 different program sources, which is around over $100 million a year of resources that we deploy to the state. So it's really exciting.
And that just goes to show people don't see what happens after an act like that is passed. They don't see all of that manpower that's put into it to make it happen. So it's great for you to go over that. If developers are financing a project with us, is it a requirement that it go through your unit to be as energy efficient as possible?
Yeah, one of the really exciting efforts that we've taken on in the last 5 years is building off of our agency's design guidelines. So that is a set of documents that any of our properties that are coming to HCR through either our tax credit programs, our subsidy sources, through our multifamily finance and development team are required to comply with. And so one of the first things we did in the unit as we were building it out was really take a look at what was included in the design guidelines. And what we landed on as a collective team was to create a specific booklet, which is a companion to our design guidelines, which we now refer to as the sustainability guidelines. So any of our properties that come in again for any of our financing sources are required to comply with both our design and sustainability guidelines. So my team is reviewing all of those projects that come in to ensure that they meet those minimum or what we refer to as baseline standards. And we think in a really exciting change when we published our first guidelines back in 2021 was to include also a stretch set of standards within those same guidebooks. So now we're really mapping out for the development community what were our minimum expectations that we're reviewing against that have to be complied with, as well as giving a roadmap for the developers of where we're hoping they'll be aiming or reaching towards with our stretch goals.
And we've overseen just 80,000 units since the governor took office. So that is a lot of work that your office has to do, a lot of projects you have to review.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest sort of joys of my job right now is working with a really great team. So I mentioned we have a really great team of 42 staff people in the sustainability unit, and it's really because of their commitment to this work and to the housing that we're developing that all of those reviews get done on an annual basis.
So what goes into making a project, quote unquote, sustainable?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. There's so many ways to answer that. And I think there's a little bit of personal flavor that gets added to anybody that you ask that question of. So for me and for how we run the unit within the agency, sustainability is really about that holistic whole approach of ensuring that the property can be reliable over time. So operationally reliable, meaning delivering comfort to our residents, indoor living conditions are comfortable, and that it is fiscally sustainable over time too. So we have reliable costs that we're going to see over time because the building is designed in a way that allows for that to happen. So some of those specific items that really lead to a building being more efficient can be, I think, bucketed into two categories. There's the building envelope, which I think of as sort of like the skin of the building. So it's anything that keeps air in or out. So this is your windows and your wall systems. And when we think about a really well-designed, sustainable building, that means that the building envelope will keep your conditioned air in and keep the outdoor air out, unless you specifically want to open or bring in air one way or the other. So that means really thinking about the connection points and the types of materials that you're using for your windows and your walls. And again, I really think about those connections between those two systems as being where we really want to focus on how we're air sealing, where the window meets the wall, so we don't have any air infiltration. From a building envelope perspective, that's really what our well-designed sustainable building is focusing on. Now, the other component to a sustainable building is thinking about the systems that are operating. So these are your heating systems, your cooling systems, your ventilation, which allow for air changes either between spaces or between indoor and outdoor. Those systems are all relying on some sort of energy source, whether that be gas, oil, or electric, or other sources that we see in smaller homes. So we really want to make sure when we think about a sustainable building that the systems we're putting in are able to operate at what we call high efficiency, meaning they can use or consume as little of the resources in order to produce optimal indoor conditions that we would want to see in a building. So, indoor air temperatures around 70, 72 degrees, really providing comfort, as well as really sustainable buildings also contemplate moisture. And so we really want to make sure we're dehumidifying in the summer, maybe humidifying a little bit in the winter. And so some of our ventilation systems now in really sustainable buildings also contribute or help benefit the indoor condition from a moisture control perspective as well. So all of that together, when we think about designing that, can create a really sustainable building that has predictable operational costs as well as really comfortable indoor living conditions. And if I could, I would add one third category that I neglectfully forgot when I was opening here, which would be the materials that we select in our buildings being really important. So thinking about materials that don't perform something which we call off-gassing. That's sort of like the scientific technical term. And what that just means is, if you've ever painted your room before, you can smell the paint sometimes. There's now paints that are lower in what we call VOCs, or volatile organic compounds. When you can smell that paint maybe 5 hours after you've painted, that's actually the paint off-gassing. So there's lots of materials in traditional building construction that will off-gas for a long time. And so we have certain requirements in our guidelines that also factor in ensuring that we're putting in products that have minimal or no off-gassing, because over time those could be harmful or just not great for our breathing in, since we live in our spaces. And I think we spend about 70% of our time indoors. So we really want to make sure the air we're breathing is healthy and giving us the best chance forward.
And it's amazing. You're talking about so many specific things that your unit is ensuring is in a building. And I think most people think about, oh, does it have solar panels on the roof? Or what kind of heating cooling does it have? And that's it. And they don't realize all the points that go into making something sustainable. It's really amazing.
Yeah, I would just add on that note, Lauren, I think that my personal approach is always to think about something as a whole system. And so I think that that's really reflected in how we are looking at our guidelines. And again, really making that connection around sustainability being about the long-term viability of a property from a indoor air quality, indoor comfort condition, as well as a fiscally sustainable position, so that we can really make sure our housing stays operationally sustainable for long periods of time, years and years.
Yeah, so what we require guidelines of developers when your unit is reviewing projects. Can you talk a little bit about what those guidelines entail?
Sure. We have 3 booklets that, as I mentioned before, that we created in 2021, which we refer to as our sustainability guidelines. And those 3 booklets focus on 3 different areas. We have our new construction booklet, which is pretty self-descriptive, specific for properties that are new, ground up, or adaptive reuse, where we're completely gutting a shell and building a whole residential feature inside that didn't otherwise exist. We have secondarily our existing buildings booklet, which is for any property that's a retrofit, substantial rehab, moderate rehab, and covers guidelines for those types of properties. And then thirdly, and I know, for any parents out there, you're not supposed to pick favorites, but this is my favorite, which is our operations and maintenance book. This book really sets the standards and guidance more so than requirements around support for our building operators to look at how some recommendations that we have from our learnings of how to really set up your operating team for success, things to think about when you're making operational upgrades. So, something fails, or if we sort of go back to this holistic approach, how do we think about maintaining a building knowing that the long-term goal is to not just replace the same thing with the same thing over long periods of time, but to really have a plan in place. So we provide some guidance in the operations and maintenance book about how to have operational planning before things start breaking as really a best practice.
Yeah, and I know that you talk about all these guidelines and someone might think, boy, developers might not look kindly on so many guidelines. But I know you and I have talked before, that's not actually the way it works. They want to comply with sustainability most of the time. And your unit has worked hard to make sure that these guidelines are supportive to the development process and don't create any undue burden on the market. So you can talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's really important to us to ensure that we're constantly getting feedback because buildings, both the innovation around the technology that we have and just lessons learned, we really think that it's important to incorporate all of that feedback. So we've been really assertive about holding roundtable discussions every year with our sort of groups that we work with, everybody from our engineering partners that our developers are hiring to our architects and engineers, and then the owners and developers themselves. And so we've held a roundtable with each of those specific groups for the past 4 years now, so that we can collect real-time feedback from what they're seeing in implementation and what has worked and what hasn't. And I'm really proud that we've been able to make iterative updates to our guidelines that are reflective of that feedback that we've received over time. And I would just sort of add that one of the outcomes from these roundtables that I had not expected, having been a practitioner myself before joining HCR, was that they were actually looking for more like black and white guidance in areas that we had originally drafted to provide more what you refer to as gray space. Like, hey, this is sort of the intention. You decide how you comply. And most of the feedback we got was just tell us go this way or go that way. And that was really enlightening for us. And we continue to get that feedback. And I don't think that it comes from a place of us imposing restrictions or barriers, but it comes from a place of clarity makes it easier to direct and to organize lots of decision making. And so I think the guidelines have been perceived as a place to sort of say, this is our to-do list, and then it's easier for the developers to implement and execute against.
Yeah, like you were saying, you would think that they wouldn't want to be so regimented in what they have to do to abide by our guidelines, but it turns out, no, just specifically tell us so we can get it done, right?
Exactly, yeah. And I think that our guidelines are really drafted from a place of the best practices that we've seen over time that result in buildings that are more operationally efficient over time and reliable to operate. And so it's really a collection of all of that guidance. We're not trying to sort of bestow hardship in the guidelines that we have, but just that clear direction.
Great. So what are the programs available to developers to address energy efficiency?
Yeah, so sort of shifting gears, I always think about the sustainability unit in these two sides, right? Our guidelines and then our program offerings. And so I think on the program side, this is where it's really fun and it's innovative for us on this space. And we've been really fortunate to work under, the guidance and leadership of our commissioner as well as Governor Hochul. And so I mentioned sort of at the top of our discussion that we had originally had our weatherization assistance program that we're still operating. And so there's two funding sources that go into that program, and we deploy about $70 million a year, and we serve just over 6,500 households a year with the weatherization assistance program. And that's really focused on everything from single family to multifamily, doing energy efficiency upgrades that specifically reduce the cost of operating and or specifically for the tenants, reducing their own utility bills, which is a really important component to all of this work. Some of our newer programs, I mentioned our Clean Energy Initiative. This is a partnership between NYSERDA and HCR that really stemmed out of the work and the collaboration from the Climate Action Council. This program is really meant to be an add-on to any of the projects that are coming in for our existing financing sources for our multifamily team that provide sort of that gap to get buildings above what we would call baseline and into our stretch standards. So we're really looking at projects that are starting to achieve some of those stretch goals that we have in our sustainability guidelines. And we provide up to about $35,000 a unit in that funding source. So really a really great opportunity to add some innovation, decarbonization, and energy efficiency enhancements to our
$35,000 a unit. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a really great subsidy.
Right. It's a great add-on to the existing programs that we have. So properties that are coming in for refinancing and retrofit can add that on as an additional subsidy source. We also have some standalone programs that we've launched more recently. So in 2023, we launched our Climate Friendly Homes Fund, which was a state initiative to provide dollars, originally up to $25,000 a unit. We've since increased that up to $37,500 a unit for projects that are mid-cycle, meaning they're not coming in for refinancing. So they're specifically looking to replace their heating systems. So this money is specifically for domestic hot water and space heating, electrification. We've now sort of expanded that program into 3 different offerings, being our all-electric multifamily program. And then we have our Climate Friendly Homes Fund, which is deployed by CPC, or Community Preservation Corporation, one of our partners. And that funding source is $250 million to help decarbonize 10,000 units. So we're well on our way on that program and deployment. And then our most recent programs are our Green Affordable Pre-Electrification Program, which is specifically for health and safety work. So really acknowledging, again, state-funded, that the housing stock in New York is one of the oldest in the country. Our existing housing, most of it was built before there was a state energy code. And so there's actually a lot of health and safety work that we need to do to enable the home or property to be able to receive energy efficiency dollars that we're talking about under my unit. And so this work is really to do that pre-work, which is really exciting. And we're just launching that effort. So really excited to talk about that in a future discussion. And then finally, we have our multifamily solar program. We haven't talked about this a ton. You sort of referred to this before, but the holistic approach here is sort of like the cherry on top is adding solar. So really being able to drive down operational costs by producing your own on-site electric. So we have $5 million, a continued partnership with NYSERDA to help smooth the application process, so that developers who are coming to us for financing can come get solar dollars and incentive dollars from us directly and sort of avoid having to also apply to NYSERDA. So really just streamlining the process of access of innovative dollars for the developers. So that's it. Just a few programs.
Is that all? Is that all we're providing? Because it covers a lot of different areas. And when you mentioned that some of our housing stock is the oldest in the nation and it's pre-energy code, and I thought to myself, I'm going to have to ask Samantha, how old is the energy code? When did that start?
Gosh, now you're really putting me on the spot. It was in the late 70s, I believe, mid to late 70s when New York State had its initial energy code, and I'm sure folks can fact check me on that. Love the comments there. So basically, a lot of our housing was
not that long ago.
Yeah,
it's not that long ago.
Yeah, and most of our housing stock in New York State was what we call pre-war. So really before 1950 it was built. And so especially in the downstate area, some of our larger buildings that have a large unit count, which, really drive up the housing stock we're talking about here, as well as in our rural and upstate parts of New York State, a lot of, industrial cities, Buffalo shipping, right, on our train lines to and from the Great Lakes to the ocean. Those industrial cities, all of that housing was really built before there were official standards that we sort of I maybe take for granted these days about maintaining or ensuring that the properties were built to a certain standard.
Oh, absolutely. I know my house is from 1960, and basically you would have to replace every single bit of insulation they put in here because that is not up to any current standard where it would even work.
Yeah.
So I can understand why our programs are so needed when we're talking about adaptive reuse of structures that already exist.
Yeah, and I think one of the really important parts of sustainability in housing to me is really being able to use what we have. Tearing something down inherently is wasteful. There's obviously a tipping point when we can't fix things. And so I just want to acknowledge that. But where we can put in additional investment dollars to revitalize, it's really great from an environmental perspective, but also ensuring that we don't have blighted properties or rundown properties, which we know from like a community development perspective can really be burdensome to the community in lots of ways. So there's sort of like a multi-factor positivity when we get to reinvest in our existing structures.
Well, yeah, because it's not sustainable to fill landfills with building materials if we can adapt the current building, right?
Yeah, waste diversion is a whole other discussion. We actually do have some requirements around waste diversion that we contemplate because it is important if we're dismantling something to make sure that where we can, we're sending the material to either be reused or recycled.
Can you talk about any specific projects that we've provided subsidies to that have really set the gold standard for sustainability?
Yeah. So one of our properties that we've recently worked on was funded by our Clean Energy Initiative program when we were in what we call our pilot phase of it, meaning they were the first early adopters. They came in when we were making $10 million available to the first folks that were willing to raise their hand and say, we're going to give this really high energy efficiency, all electric design standard a shot. And so that property is Steamboat Square. And they really sort of took the charge of how do we design a well thought out building, in really echoing back to thinking about the building envelope as well as the building system selection. And really excited to say, and I don't have the numbers directly to share, but really excited to say that they've seen tremendous success in to sort of put very clearly what they thought was going to happen when they operated the building is actually happening. So they're seeing the expectation of their design playing out as closely to what they had thought in real time. So I think that's a huge win. It means a lot of things happened. The on-site construction team coordinated with the folks that are doing the management and the reporting to make sure that those systems are being installed, thoughtfully with the other teams. So when we think about building or renovating a building, there's lots of different trades on site, and it can sometimes be really challenging to make sure the plumber is also talking to the electrician, is also talking to the guy that's doing the drywall and sealing everything up. And when we see the model or the plans turn into reality, we know that all of that went well, or as best as it could. And so that's really a huge success from that property that we saw with one of our early adopters. And I'm really excited.
Steamboat is in Albany, right?
Yes, correct. And I'm really excited to share sort of maybe more exciting. We're releasing some case studies on this property and some others to really highlight the specifics of what decisions did that property make, what equipment did they choose, and some of those, exact numbers of the model versus the actuals, so that we can help learn from what went well. And we're also conducting some other case studies on properties where they've maybe had a little bit more challenge, or we're working with them to make sure that we repair anything that we need to in real time. And so we're really committed to making sure these properties end up in that same place as Steamboat, and be transparent with the market of what we're learning that works well and what doesn't as well.
I can say I drive by Steamboat to go to our Hampton Plaza office, and it is very cool. They're towers that are on the edge of a highway along the Hudson River, and it's been very cool to see them not just knock buildings down, to renovate them and to figure out how to best do it. So that has been a cool project, even as a person who doesn't know anything about it, to see.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Our case studies are also including anonymized residential feedback, because obviously I think it's really important for me personally, as well as for our unit, to make sure we're constantly reminding ourselves why we're doing all of this and why we're setting these standards. And it's for the residents that are occupying these spaces. And some of the early feedback that we've heard from Steamboat Square is that the residents are feeling really comfortable. They're happy with the control they have over their indoor air temperature. And so those are really exciting, I think, little snippets that we'll see from these case studies when we release them as well.
By what kind? Do they have heat pumps in Steamboat Square?
Yes.
So why is it important for New York to ensure sustainability guidelines are an integral part of constructing and preserving affordable housing?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when I think about that question, right? Like why is sustainability integral to housing and preserving housing? It makes me think of almost like an obvious statement, which is our buildings can and should last for hundreds plus years, right? And we know in New York State, we have buildings that have been around for more than 100 years, and several hundreds, thousands that have been around for more than 50 and 60 years, right? This is common. This is like what we should expect when we build something. And so I think that having a set of sustainability guidelines that ensure the property can operate, that it can be managed by our community development partner, and that we can retain and ensure the affordability of those units by having reliable operational costs. I don't know how you can take sustainability out of that. Like, that is an important factor that we have to really be actively thinking about as a whole market of how do we ensure it's in every decision we're making, because without it, we would not have enough housing, because we don't have enough capital to constantly be building new housing. We have to rely on what we have existing. And the more that we can, do limited infusions of large amount of capital to renovate buildings, the more that they should be able to sustain longer periods of time before needing additional renovation of capital and additional financing. And I think sustainability is like a key way of ensuring that we're putting in quality, high performance equipment, as well as setting high quality standards for how we're constructing our buildings so that they are reliable, sustainable, and cost effective to operate.
Yeah, it has been really incredible to listen to you today, because people don't know enough about this topic. They hear it and they think it's just solar panels. They think it's just getting rid of gas and using electric, and that's the end of it. And to hear about every segment of a project, you're talking about the building envelope and making sure everything's airtight and the materials we use and the paint we use. It's really wonderful how much your unit is doing to ensure not just reducing gas emissions, but people's comfort and comfort in affordable housing. So it's really great to hear.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, I think I would add to that sort of statement and just say, I think like so many things in life, and I could think of 100 analogies, so I'll spare everyone listing out analogies, but I think you have to really do the basics first. And to me, this is the basics of sustainability are really focusing on the core of how we're building, making sure that we can have predictable, reliable comfort, costs, all of those things that you just, sort of restated. Then when we do that, we can focus on the fun, cool, innovative stuff like solar panels and geothermal heating systems, which, literally drill down into the earth to extract the temperature reliability that we have from the earth in order to reduce the amount of new energy we have to put in. So there's a lot of really innovative systems that we can layer on once we start making these really great step one smart decisions. And then we can focus on the innovative and fun stuff. So I definitely want to sort of be clear that that is also happening within my unit, thinking about all those fun, innovative solutions. And we're really excited when project teams come to us and are excited about that stuff as well. But I agree that it is really critical, especially at this time, to make sure that the market and the industry understands we really want to focus on the baseline as the critical step one.
Well, Samantha, this has been eye-opening chat for people who don't realize how much behind-the-scenes focus there is to address greenhouse gas emissions while providing affordable housing to New Yorkers. So thank you for the incredible work you and your team do every day. And thank you for being on this podcast.
Oh my gosh, Lauren, thank you so much for having me. This was great. I really appreciate the time today.
For listeners who want to find out more about HCR's work in sustainability, go to www.hcr.ny.gov/sustainability. You've been listening to the Renewing New York podcast, a production of New York State Homes and Community Renewal. You can listen to all episodes of Renewing New York wherever you enjoy podcasts, as well as the visual version of our episodes posted on HCR's YouTube channel.